what timeline you're on? Do you know how to choose your timeline wisely? How to experience this ascension game that is unfolding at this time on planet Earth? Are you aware that you actually chose to be here and to play this game? I prefer to think of everything in life as a game to be played because I enjoy playing. I enjoy having fun. Love letting my little child come out and experience life as a game. In this game of life, do you know how to be physically embodied during the ascension process? Are you ready to expand? Are you ready to raise your frequency? Are you ready to really play the ascension game as the game that it is, with fun and with joy, with remembrance of who you really are? If you are, then you are going to enjoy this show. We're going to talk about timelines, about ascension through physical embodiment. We're going to talk about Einstein, quantum physics. We're going to geek out together on the show today. My guest is Zoe Davenport. She is a multi-dimensional channel, a modern-day oracle, an energy expert, way shower, writer, and speaker, and someone who we're going to have a lot of fun geeking out with about science and spirituality and quantum physics and how to ascend through physical embodiment and how to choose your timelines wisely. And she has some interesting things to share with us about her journey through the universe. If this is your first time that you visited our magical channel in our part of the universe, you may want to consider subscribing and becoming part of the global family of light. I am Heaven Hope, and this is Conversations with Goddess. We bring information for your expansion, your elevation, your inspiration. Welcome to the show, Zoe. Finally, it has been quite a dance getting here in this moment with you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
In your bio, it says that you're a modern day oracle. Could you explain what is a modern day oracle?
I never really know what to label myself as because I'm always evolving and always changing. And over the years, I've done a lot of different trainings and healings and modalities, and then also had a lot of past life regressions and activations and rememberings and awakenings and accessibilities to different teachings and different tools and different dimensions. So I'm always seeming to kind of be playing around with different words. And in this present day reality, it seems to be modern day oracle. And so for me, it feels like it's the overarching name that is like an umbrella for all of the different skill sets that I have to offer in the world, which is available to all of us when we're fully awakened and we're fully expressed, right? Which is we have access to telepathy, we have access to remote viewing, we have access to astral traveling, we have access to psychic abilities, we have access to mediumship, we have access to inner healing and feeling, seeing, sensing, knowing more about ourselves as an energetic being. I'm always a work in progress. I'm always studying and learning. And right now it's Oracle. Next year, it might be multidimensional channel. The year after that, it might just be nothingness. I don't know. It's always an interesting thing. And I asked my guides about this. I was like, could you just give me something simple? Like, can I just be like a meditation teacher or breathwork facilitator? And I have toyed with that. Of like, maybe I could just do something that's like really beautiful, but just like one thing. But it's not. I'm sharing about multidimensionality, and that has many layers to it and many complexities.
I have just mentioned a plethora of gifts that fascinate me. Would you say that you now have access to all of these gifts?
Yes, definitely. Maybe not all at the same time, and things ebb and flow as it does with life. But there are, undeniably many experiences that I have experienced those particular skill sets.
How did they get activated and awakened?
I was pretty connected to the interdimensional realms as a child, and it's quite common when you've experienced a lot of trauma at a young age or around kind of like quite toxic environments. You do tend to kind of more leave your body to find safer planes of existence. so that you're not physically feeling and absorbing too much, right? So I was very empathic growing up as a kid, and I was also very psychic as well. My family had kind of like a joke with me that they stopped wrapping Christmas presents because I wouldn't open them, and they were like, "Oh, you're not going to open this one?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, but that's the..." So I would know what's in the presents, and I would have stayed in the car with my mum or something, and he'd come back. I'm like, "Oh," and I wouldn't have seen the shopping. I'm like, "Oh, can I have some of the oranges?" And he's like, "How do you know I have oranges?" I was like, "You have 6 oranges in the bag." We have memories of being a child, but it's always great to like have confirmation of like the parents actually affirming, yes, you did actually, you were having those skills. Mm-hmm. So that was activated at a very young age. I think I actually came in and was ready for the path. And unfortunately, you know, what happens is when that's not activated enough, like it's not encouraged at a young age, we tend to kind of get shut down, right, into our teenage years, and especially if we're learning in a different way at school, any of our specific like superpowers. So I had a superpower of a photographic memory, and I had a superpower of being able to recite a book word for word, having only it being read to me once.
Wow.
And which is great, right? And if I was in an amazing conscious school now, imagine where I'd be, right? But I'm here, so it doesn't matter. It's all perfect. So over the years, I shut down anything to do with spirituality, energetics, and any like superpowers. Well, I say I shut them down. I think I've always still had them, but perhaps not been that present to them. So when I had, you know, an awakening as such, of like a remembering of who I was in 2008, that's when I started to go down the rabbit hole of consciousness. And it's like everything started to come flooding back in again. And I was having very unexplainable experiences on the daily that were undeniably showing me the truth of consciousness and reality. And that's when I started to travel interdimensionally. I would kind of end up on spaceships. I would like have a connection to all of these guides and beings. I remember doing a meditation once, I think it was like 1 a.m, to open your third eye. I did this meditation and I looked in the mirror and there was like this purple light like emanating, and I could feel the vibration, and I shot back on the bed because I was so scared of what I was like, I better not mess around with this energy. And I remember like just in the window, I could still see the energy coming out. So over the years, more and more and more has come through for me as I've allowed myself to shift more and more density. So releasing some of these like deeper layers of what the identity of Zoe, of how she knew herself to be, and how I know myself into being this now. And so it's been like a very long, I mean, you know, 2008 to now, whatever the timeline of that is, but then also like a lifetime. And particularly the last 7 years, this isn't a part-time experience for me. This is every day. I'm reminding myself of my awakening, of my consciousness, of my divinity, of what's available to me, and educating myself and exercising, practicing and flexing the spiritual muscles to continue opening up those deeper channels of alignment. And it's work, you know, it's work to be who we are, but it starts to be far easier than who we were.
How do you exercise those muscles, and how do you practice embodiment and various different skill sets that you have?
I would say the main thing is really a strong, dedicated practice of meditation and breath work. And then also I've developed my life where I get to go out into nature as much as possible, Epsom salt baths, cleansing my body, doing some deeper cleanses, surrounding myself with like soul family, having epic conversations, breaking out of the normalcy of reality and inviting others into that potential as well. So after a while, this just becomes who you are. Mm-hmm. Right? But you're not necessarily always looking for a spiritual experience, a mystical awakening. You know, not everything has to have like a really deep meaning, but you just are the beingness in your body and having the experiences through connection to this physical vessel and the connection to the physical reality around you. So it just becomes a conscious choosing of what we're aligning to. So I'd say that's one of the biggest ways of practicing, right? Mm-hmm. Practicing being awake is practicing the remembrance of what's available for us when we're present. And that's the biggest thing. Practicing presence is incredibly challenging for humanity because we are so taught to be distracted.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so this is something that is very triggering for people when they're in my field, because I'm incredibly present. And I catch them when they're not being present. And it's like they double take, like, how did you know I was thinking that? It's like, because I can hear your thoughts.
Ascension through physical embodiment. Would you please speak into that?
So many times when we're on our awakening journey, we have to have a certain level of out-of-body experiences to remind us of the divinity that we are. And then it's like we come crashing down into the human experience, and it feels very dense and heavy, and it feels like there's a disconnect to the euphoric and mystical experiences that we've had and where we're at in our humanness. So tends to happen that there's like a time delay where we need to kind of like allow the body time and integration to catch up with the divinity or the amount of consciousness that we're able to hold. And so there needs to be a merging of the two versions, right? The merging of our higher self-consciousness, and for that to feel stabilized and equalized within the body. And that comes through the regulation of the nervous system, deep meditation practices, cleaning up our physical reality, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're speaking, what we're doing. And so to allow ourselves a more holding of the light so that we're not kind of feeling disconnected or out of body.
Physical embodiment is so important because that is how we experience this reality, which brings me to the next question. What is this reality?
Well, this reality is what we think it into being. This reality is how source gets to express itself in desire. This reality is this plane of existence. What most people are operating on is in duality, right? So it's in opposites, so that we can understand all the different versions and all the different potentials. For me, this reality is love. It's how love expresses itself. For me, this reality is community. For me, this reality is connection. For me, this reality is co-creation and collaboration.
Speaking of this reality, I would love for you to share two fabulous stories that I heard in some podcasts you were a guest on. One was about an Indian mathematician, and I'd love for you to share about this mathematician who wrote a proof for this equation that he miraculously downloaded.
We are born with incredible gifts and incredible talents, and the whole system of the third dimensional reality is not set up to really honor and encourage these incredible gifts and talents. And this divine being was in India. This was before the Second World War. And he had written a mathematical equation that got sent to Cambridge. And they were in disbelief that somebody from India with no kind of like English academics or professor degrees or anything could have accomplished something. And they were in disbelief that it was even accurate. And so they actually flew him to the UK, to Cambridge, and was like, well, we want to publish you, but we can't publish you until you basically prove it. You have to do the proof. And he's like, it's correct. Trust me. I don't have time. I have more coming through. I have to keep going. So he was basically a direct channel of wisdom, of consciousness, of God, of Shiva, whatever you want to call it. And so he was like downloading some of the most complex mathematical equations known to man, but it took him 4.5 years to be published for one equation, because, you know, science and maths, like the way it's set up, is like, I get it, right? You have to show the proving out of the way that they understand it for it to be right. So it took him about 4.5 years. And unfortunately, shortly after the Second World War, he passed away. But before he passed, one of the professors asked him, how do you do it? Because you don't work it out how we've been trained to work it out. And like, how are you so attuned to the mathematics? And he said, well, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. And he said, well, try me. And he said, God speaks to me and she writes it on my arm. And he's like, and that's why I don't have time to do all the proofs. So fast forward 50 years, a lot of his equations have now been proven by other mathematicians, because obviously he passed away. The information that came through him is how they are to understand deeper levels of black holes.
Wow. That's amazing.
Which is just incredible. And I always laugh at this because I was really bad at maths at school, but I always knew the correct answer. But because I didn't work it out, didn't show the working out, I always failed. I always got like really low marks. And they asked me one day, they're like, well, how do you work it out? Because obviously they're trained, you've got to do it like this. And I said, well, I see light and color. And that's how I understood maths.
Wow.
Right. And so unfortunately, I probably need to like clear some energy around this, but I wonder what would have happened had me or any child fully allowed to go all the way with how they understand the universe in that way. The technology and information as we know it on this planet is only as we know it. And we think to the information that we had as a species 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we have learned more now, but it's so hard for like humanity to grasp in the present moment the potential future. But there are beings in this world that rise up beyond that, above what anyone else says. And that's when they go on to create incredible technologies, incredible change in the world. So I firmly believe we are in this awakening journey to hold in our beingness more light encoded information, which expresses itself in all of the businesses and technologies and creations that we're here to do, whether that's through your teaching or writing books or programs or masterminds or setting up a technology company or developing an app or developing a specific breath work. It's how we are expressing ourselves into the world. And so any of you listening to this, go and grab onto that thing that you know is deep inside of you, even though it doesn't make sense to somebody else, and run with that, because that is what we are here to expand upon as a species, is to really express ourselves. Like the collective consciousness of humanity, we want to keep evolving. We want to keep innovating. If we stop innovating, if we get lazy as a humanity, which is kind of what's happening, we're the laziest we've ever been. We've swapped using this and using our beingness for convenience. And that convenience is dampening our spirit and our soul. And so much like this mathematician, like grab on to that creative expression that's inside of you and keep going in that direction, because that's what we're here for.
Now, math normally is considered a very rigid system and very masculine in its approach. This mathematician said, God, she comes to me in a frequency and she writes it on my arm. This was such a beautiful, soft, receptive way that this mathematician really downloaded the information, therefore was not able to do it the way the system wanted it done, but still received brilliance and divine information that has now been proved. And now this brings me to the next story that I would love for you to share, which is the one about Einstein's unpublished equation.
Oh, okay. It's coming to me now. I'm like, what on earth did I share about Einstein? I'm like, well, you must have watched yeah.
What ultimately came through from that is that he realized that the highest frequency is love.
Yes, that was it.
That's the story. And he did have this unpublished equation. And the reason that, I'll let you finish it, the reason that it was not published was because he came to the conclusion that humanity was not ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I was like, what did I share about Einstein? I was like, oh, yes. Yeah. And I thought that was so beautiful because it's true. It's true. I look at it as spirituality is the feminine, science is the masculine. As we're integrating this within ourselves, we're integrating the double helix spiral and we're coming into union with heaven on earth. That's what I feel. And so, yeah, these great mathematicians of the time were starting to tap into, there's another layer of existence that has to be integrated with maths and science, which is the spirituality. And I mean, we've started to see that now with, with quantum physics. Right? When we're studying quantum physics and string theory, scientists are actually starting to discover the unseen forces, and there's science to that. It's much like when we look at chaos theory. When you study chaos theory, it looks like it's just a whole random set of numbers or equations or things bouncing around. But when you actually look into it and you study it, it's perfectly aligned. So when we look at reality and it looks like chaotic, when you look at the science of it, the maths of it, it's perfectly aligned. So it's beautiful that I feel like that was like almost like his last gift to humanity, right? Is to, yes, we get to understand from this very analytical mind, but we need the love piece. It's like the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Absolutely.
So, and I did have a very scientific and mathematical background. And ironically, because I was so bad in school, I never continued to pursue it, even though I was amazing at it. But it just wasn't in the way that they had been teaching. So I didn't kind of like carry that on. But I do love quantum physics, and I do love bridging science and spirituality, because I do feel that both have a very important place together. And when we look at, the technologies of the world, that is because of the, thanks to science and maths. And we look at, the innovation and creativity in the world, and that's thanks to spirituality.
What do you think of artificial intelligence? What are your thoughts and feelings about
Yeah, this is the hot topic right now. I mean, the irony is like, have we already gone through this? Is this a simulation? Is there already AI that's taken over reality and we're just like these puppets? Who knows, right? That's like an interesting theory to look at. I'd like to believe in this moment I'm kind of enjoying the avatar that I'm playing. And I feel it could go one of two ways. It could go one of many ways. I don't want to simplify it, but let's say for the purpose of this conversation, it could go in the way that AI takes over a lot of the industries and jobs that perhaps a lot of humanity had done, paving the way for a renaissance where now beings get to have full divine expression and creativity running through them, as opposed to a lot of jobs that are necessary. They're instead encouraged to be craftsmanship and make things and create things. So it could go that way, where actually AI, robotics, technology take over a lot of this, and there's more of an opening. That's as humanity comes together, creates heaven on earth. We destroy some of the international combined banking systems and the monetary system, coming into like better exchange, maybe through cryptocurrencies, and governments working together. Who knows, right? I mean, that's like amazing. That's the kind of timeline that I choose.
Possibilities in those amazing timelines, which I definitely want to dive into.
Yeah. And it's the same with 5G. 5G could then be used to emit particular frequencies for, like, say Fred's walking down the road and there's an awareness that Fred might have a heart attack, and then 5G can emit a particular frequency that's going to help him overcome that heart attack or something like that. So the technology is not the scary thing. It's the consciousness of humanity of what they choose to do with it. And that's kind of where I'm in neutrality with it. It's like, well, whatever timeline we choose is what we choose, right? Source is infinite. So I like to choose that one as opposed to the other timeline.
It'd be really helpful because not everybody understands timelines. For you to maybe explain timelines according to how do we choose our highest and best timelines? How do we choose timelines wisely?
I love that. So I would say that collectively we're having a shared experience of a reality, and individually we're having an individual experience of reality. And that's why, like, the world in itself, there's so much diversity. There's so many different types of culture and music and beings and professions and everything, right? So we're having like worlds upon worlds within one world with one creator consciousness. And so to me, we can't control the collective consciousness of humanity, but we can control how we react and respond to the collective consciousness of humanity. And within that letting go of the control, we start to break the illusion that we have any idea about what's going on in general when it comes to manifestation, and we allow the full expression of what is in alignment for us. And so when we're choosing a timeline, it's to let go of all thought, all expectation, and all control. Allow the presence of grace into our beingness, and allow what is for us to align and show up and come into harmony. There's a lot in the spiritual communities around, we're at war and we're, with dark forces and all of these things. It's like, well, we get to choose a different bandwidth of frequency as more of us align to that harmonized field that will tip the scales, that will make a difference. But we're not trying to control the when, we're not trying to control the how. We are simply being in the beingness of our divine essence and holding neutrality for humanity. You get to really understand frequency, and the game of frequency is how you are aligning to a different bandwidth of a timeline. And a timeline can be one day you've been in a job and the same marriage for 30 years. You have a spiritual, mystical experience, sat on a rock at a river because you were guided there. And suddenly you see a bunch of light coming in. And the next day, who you were is no longer who you are. Your wardrobe doesn't feel the same. Your relationship is so clear that it's done. It is so clear that it's done with so much love. And you pack your bag and off you go into a new adventure of you. And so that to me is when you really know that you have shifted a timeline, when you don't feel the identity of who you were even the day before resonates to you.
Timelines are always constantly shifting. Everything is constantly shifting. Everything is in movement.
Yeah, everything is always moving and everything is always shifting, and we're creating infinite realities based on our thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so, we can be bouncing in and out of different frequencies, but a particular timeline, it has more stability to it. And so we have free will. Okay, we could have been staying in that relationship for another 30 years, but there's something in our beingness and our consciousness that chose a different path that day, and that different path opened up a different potential for us. So we're not trying to control a timeline or like, oh, I want a different timeline, or run away from the experience of where we're at, because wherever we go, there we are. Whatever we choose differently will be the same as what we were experiencing. It just might be in a different package, might be delivered differently, but you'll know when, because you'll feel it. You will feel that there is a different way of who you are.
We ultimately have lived out many lives where we have perhaps been in service to others, and then many lives where we have been in service to self. Can you give more clarity on what is the difference between the two ways of life? And is the center the balanced state of consciousness between service to self and service to others?
The best way to explain that is if you think about the infinity symbol, right? The infinity is never ending. It's like the equation of the universe, right? But what happens with the infinity is it kind of goes in the middle and it goes around, and then it loops back into the middle again, and it goes around. So say the middle is us, right? As we so shall receive. As we give out, we so shall receive. And that's really, really important, right? So we're not here to play the martyr. We're not here to live in scarcity. We are here to allow ourselves the full abundance, the full richness, the full vitality, the full health of life itself. And we are here to admit that and bring joy to others through the beingness and our expression, and how that wants to be manifested in our divine service. But it's not divine service of I'm doing all of this and not allowing myself to be in the receptivity of that. And I'm not talking about money or cars. You'll feel it in the energetics because it feels balanced. Mm-hmm. And this is something that's really hard for people. It is finding balance. It's not, it's self-care, but it's far more complex than giving yourself a bubble bath or, taking a goddess day or something. It's about understanding the abundance of the I am presence and allowing yourself to admit that as a frequency, and allowing yourself to receive that as a frequency, and aligning with all of it. And service to self, when we do selfless acts of service, it feels so good. It feels so good to serve others. It feels so good to support others. It feels so good to make an impact, and also allow ourselves to be deeply nourished and taken care of, so that we're not exhausting ourselves, that we get to show up, right? And so the old paradigm is, the man standing on the top of hill, like he's, no rags to his name, but like everyone else is living in abundance because he's given everything away and he can't take care of himself. Right? We're not here to play the martyr anymore. We're here to balance and equalize the field through giving and receiving. And I see this all the time, especially in, if you have a spiritual based business, there can sometimes be a little bit of distortion with boundaries around, well, this person hasn't paid me for a session, and so I'm not going to open up the space. Or, my philosophy, when you feel soul, spirit coming through you, and you feel something with a particular person, gift to that person, and gift wholeheartedly, because the way you gift to them will bring back everything for you. And listen to that, because spirit is always wanting to work through us to support others, to support us. right? So it's that infinity. And I'll give you a really good example of this, and this will probably like wake people up, right? So about a year and a half ago, I was like doing all these things in my business, and I got into my head and I was trying to like strategize, right? And do whatever that means, right? Like be in 3D density. Like I run a 5D business, I'm 5D consciousness. And I tuned in and I got really present. I was like, okay, obviously I don't feel good when I'm doing these things. I feel tired and exhausted, and it doesn't feel like it's flowing. And so I cleared everything and I said, show me how I can be in service to self and others. Show me the way. And I got a very clear download to offer a $10,000 coaching package for free to a particular person. And so I phoned this person up and I said to them, like, I don't know whether you'll receive this or not, but I'm really guided. I'm meant to work with you. And so we got on the phone and I shared with him what it would be like. And I said to him, like, this is the investment and this is what you get to pay. My only desire is for you to show up fully committed. And we do this for as long as we feel necessary. And the shifts that showed up in that man's life was incredible. And it felt so good to give. How much money I made that month was about $160K.
From this gift.
From this gift, because I was in service and I allowed myself to receive the abundance that is available to me, not necessarily just through that one interaction. Like I expanded my field so big. I was like, how can I be in true divine service? And I know that I am in receptivity of that service, however it wants to come in, without control, without expectations, without attachments. And I do this all the time. There's a part of my soul work that I don't boast about online. I don't share these stories because I don't need the ego recognition of this. But this is some of the deeper work that I do and the energetics that align me to the receptivity and giving of the selfless acts of service. It allows for a deeper resonance of what we're capable of receiving. And so I'll say this, like, it's never truly how we think it's going to work out for us in terms of receiving, in terms of manifesting. But if we can get really quiet and trust in what is coming up for us, the opportunities are unlimited.
Beautiful. Anything that you would like to close with, other than sharing with us how people can find you if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was such a pleasure to be with you today. And if any of you were inspired by this conversation, you can reach out to me on my website at zoedavenport.com or on Instagram, which is I am Zoe Davenport. And just keep following your heart. You're loved, you're beautiful. And thank you for this amazing conversation.
Thank you. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you soon. For all time, you are loved, even more than you can know. And with each passing day of life, we watch you as you grow. To be more full of wisdom, radiant and divine. Oh, dear soul, you're a masterpiece, a miracle design. So may the goddess bless you and keep you all aglow. And we wish you loving kindness, and may all blessings